Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Tom, back again.
Long time no see, Parker. Long time no see.
I think we're just going to make that joke every time we do a part two.
Apologies.
Hey, same clothes as last week. What's going on? Yeah, throwback to our last part two. So for this week's episode, we're continuing on last week's conversation about group versus private practice considerations, diving a little bit deeper into some group practice specific questions at the beginning here, and then in the latter half we'll get into what that process of switching to private practice from group practice kind of looks like. So let's start with group practice. So for those that are considering joining a group practice, what should they look for in terms of culture, support, operational setup?
Yeah, very good. And I think, one of the most compelling reasons that people join group practices is because it's great to have peers in this field. It is a passion field, but it's also can be a very stressful and difficult field. If you think about people are coming to you with often very severe problems and looking for you to help them in life, and having colleagues that can provide support to you can be invaluable. And so a lot of people choose group practice just because they want the support from peers and colleagues. I think that telehealth has once again changed some of this support a lot. So if you are looking for, hey, I've got a half hour free, I'm going to walk around and see whose door is open to ask them about this case, or see if someone wants to grab a coffee and take a quick walk, you want to be aware then that you're looking for a practice with offices where people come in and see people in person. And there are lots of those types of practices that do exist. But if that's one of the main reasons that you're deciding to go to a group practice, be careful if people are just all working from home doing telehealth, and then the company isn't doing anything to provide online chat channels or online meetings or online lectures that can bring some of that sense of community in. So that's a first thing that comes in my mind. Then your questions about culture and support. Yeah, I think I'd like to think that mental health clinics that have been started by other clinicians are going to be pretty good on the culture piece. There are a lot of clinics that have not been started by clinicians, though. And so being aware of what's been set up in the group practice, is it set up by business people that are just trying to churn out patient visits at any cost, or whether it's business people or other clinicians, have they taken steps to make it a great place to work in terms of what mental health clinicians value? And so if you think about that, that's probably, lunch and learn events. It is some sort of group process. It's funding for attending conferences. It's different learning events, guest speakers. And I when with the clinics I started, my goal was to make it like a academic center without the academic bureaucracy. So we like to bring in speakers. We got our own CME accreditation so we could host events. We would let our clinicians have some protected time, 10% of their time to be protected for a special project That could be anything mental health related. So sort of providing pay and support, because a lot of people in this field do have things they're passionate about. And those are where a group practice can far outshine anything that a solo practice can provide. Talking, so then of course, talking to clinicians from the different group practices, people who've been there a long time and short time, is how you can collect this information. And I would say never trust the people who are doing the interview or trying to do the hiring, but always make sure that you speak for other clinicians at your level, i.e. master's, PhD, or physician or nurse practitioner that have been at the company, to see what that culture is really like.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for any job that you might be joining. You know, trying to do some networking, reach out to the people who either currently work in the type of position that you're applying for, or have historically done that position. Maybe they left or got promoted, or something. But yeah, networking with those people to really understand. Like, I think that'll give you the best picture of what a company's culture is like. The recruiting department is always going to be, the best possible face for the company. So yeah, always great to do your due diligence and network with the anybody who you would become your coworker if you began working at whatever place it is. In this case,
Right.
Group clinic.
Right. And I think especially for people who are using a recruiter to find their group practice, recruiter or headhunter, which is very, I think physicians all have some experience with this, but now it's even more common for non-physicians who are in the mental health field to use recruiters. And the recruiters, get a chunk of the employer has to pay them a chunk of your salary for 1 or 2 years. And recruiters notoriously will bend the truth to make it seem like the best situation. And I've recently had several colleagues who were smart enough that after, kind of wrote down all these promises about the workplace the recruiter had said. And when they talked to the actual employer and talked about the specific benefits, it was really outright lies with some of the things that were being promised. And so many people don't take that extra step of diligence, and then you sign a contract and you're locked into a job. Well, you're never locked in to a job, but you've wasted time and have landed in an environment that is not the right fit for yourself. So, yeah. And you're right. It is sound advice for any job.
So going back to what you were saying about, collaboration and peer support in a group practice, it sounds like, there are lots of potential benefits, especially if the practice that you're working for prioritizes kind of that like academic advancement, doing, case studies or journal club, whatever it is, especially, during lunchtime, buy everybody sandwiches and let's talk about this cool new research article that, might be relevant for all of us. So yeah, as somebody who is in private practice, yes, they're independent. We've talked about the benefits that come with the independence of a private practice, but that, I guess, continuing education and collaboration piece. If I was somebody who is in private practice, are there ways for me to, seek out to get that for myself?
Yeah, there definitely are. And there's a lot of, groups and networks of solo practice, private practice people who set up a once a month journal club or once a month coffee, so that it brings some of that collaboration and connectedness to other peers. And there are lots of these groups set up all over the country. I think it's important to know that this is maybe once or twice a month this is something you're not getting paid for. It's unlikely it's going to be during the workday. It's more likely going to be an evening type thing or a weekend thing because of matching everyone's schedule who's in a private practice. So if you're someone that likes to see other people on a daily basis and not just be, it's somewhat isolating to be in a private practice where you're just seeing your patients and not other peers. If you want that on a very regular basis, something to strongly consider for doing private practice. But if you're okay with finding some groups and doing once or twice a month educational meetings or peer collaborations, then that can be a great option for getting some of that colleague support in this field.
And I'm also thinking about attending conferences as a potential option. Good way to meet other peers, and just learn more about what's going on in your field.
Yeah, and there are some, for example, I'm on the Psychiatry Network group on Facebook, which is a group of 14,000 psychiatrists. And then there's a little subgroup for private practice chat, and it's people who are in private practice. And even that can be connecting. You can throw out questions there to your peers who are in private practice. And in general, everyone's pretty friendly and helpful. And if you're eating your lunch and a question goes up there that you've got some expertise on, you can help out a peer, and that does provide some connectedness, albeit not the face-to-face in-person connection, but those groups exist for everyone as a way to stay connected.
Yeah, I'm personally part of a similar type of group, not for psychiatry, but more so for design. But it's nice to be working really in any kind of field and to be able to find other people who might be. This is just me kind of talking about design for a brief second, but yeah, as somebody who maybe is working as a sole designer somewhere, to meet other designers is great. Whereas if you work for like a big, Google or whatever, then you'll have your network of designers within the company. So, yeah, same experience applies across multiple different types of disciplines.
Agreed.
So, yeah, let's talk about the people who are in group practice and are thinking about starting their own private practice. What are the implications for non-compete agreements when you're thinking about leaving, and how what are ways to navigate that?
Yeah, no, and this is a very timely topic. So what is a non-compete agreement is the first question. And a non-compete agreement is if you sign up with an employer, and with that employer they have a contract for you to sign. Often in that contract will be a clause that is the non-compete agreement that will say, hey, if you stop working for me, you're not allowed to set up shop within 20 miles for up to 3 years until you're done working here. And it's something that theoretically is done to prevent people from joining a group, learning some trade secrets, and then taking all the knowledge you've learned at behalf of your other employer and just setting up your own shop. Right. That's the quote fear. I think in reality, that's not something that really happens very much. And there are actually a lot of states, including California, that have always kind of banned non-compete agreements. But very recently, the Federal Trade Commission has ruled that all non-compete agreements are unenforceable. And it was something that I think was somewhat true regardless that these agreements were not very enforceable. But beginning in September of this year, September 4th, 2024, non-compete agreements among non-senior executives will no longer be enforced. And this is being pushed through because the idea is that these non-compete agreements have been bad for innovation and the start of new businesses. And I think they're hoping that they're saying non-compete agreements prevent maybe 8 to 10,000 new businesses each year from starting. And we know that despite all the big companies in the U.S., 2/3 of all people actually work for small businesses or by themselves. And so that is what the backbone of the country's financial system actually is. And so I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert on this topic at all. I would say that there are some exceptions to where non-compete agreements are valid. So one was if you're a senior level employee, which is defined as making over, I think, $150,000 a year, which a lot of mental health clinicians will probably make over that amount. But if you're a policymaker or senior executive for a company, there can still be a non-compete. So if you've been in a group practice for a number of years and you're actually the chief operating officer, chief medical officer, or someone who makes policy decisions, be very careful about leaving and starting a business 2 blocks away. You can always talk to a lawyer and you can always talk to your current employer that if you're ready to leave, most employers don't want someone at their company that's not excited about being there. And maybe you can come to some sort of agreement and the reality is, Parker, in mental health, there is no shortage of patients to be seen.
Right.
We have a way, way, way more demand than supply. So it always feels ridiculous in this field. Non-competes feel especially ridiculous in this field. I'd say the other example of non-competes have to do if you sell a portion of your company. So if you're in a group and you've had some shares of that group and then the group sells some or all of that to a private equity group, for example, if you receive distribution from that, then a non-compete can apply to you potentially through terms of that deal that you've received money as a buyout for selling some or all of those shares. So there's probably more. Those are the things that I'm familiar with. But the good news in general for lots and lots of other businesses, but also just for mental health clinicians as well, is very unlikely you have to worry about any non-compete agreement if you're leaving a group. If you have been working for someone without a contract, which a lot of people do, or if your contract just specifies a couple of things and doesn't have a non-compete clause, then you really don't need to worry about that at all. And this goes back, this is a consideration if you're signing up with a group that is giving you a contract. Read it yourself, of course, highlight what
always
seems confusing, and that is something that if it's a 10-page document with a lot of legal terms, it is worth having a lawyer look at it. I know that I increasingly became, as an employer, we used to have a very complex contract with a lot of legalese in it. And over the years, I thought it was more and more ridiculous, and it was wasting my time having to explain what these different clauses were. So we actually drastically simplified our contracts over the years. And I don't think this isn't high-tech national security secrets. Still, we're providing a service to people who are sick, and do we really need overly complex contracts? I don't think so. But
so in this case, I mean, that's great to hear about non-compete agreements, and when we were talking about it before recording, I was thinking that it was only in regards to mental health providers and not realizing that this was kind of, all industries, which is great to hear. Great to hear that, lower level employees are not going to be, disadvantaged just because of where they work. So yeah, that is great to hear. So then thinking about it in the context of a mental health provider, what does it look like? It's maybe you're starting your own private practice and it's not, they're not worried about you competing, maybe, or stealing some kind of methodology. All practice methodologies, should be, usable by all types of clinicians, right? So what about the patients themselves? What about, I've been working at this group for 6 years. My patients know me. They've been seeing me for a long time, but now I'm thinking about starting my own private practice. Are there any ethical or practical considerations that somebody should be keeping in mind when it comes to having their patients transition away from the group and into their private practice?
Yeah, great question. And this is another one that sometimes can be written into contracts that might say if you leave the group, you're not allowed to take your patients with you. I don't know if I've ever seen anything as black and white as that. Leaving a job is going to create emotional responses if you're in a group practice. And so, if you tell your employer you're leaving, that's lost revenue for your employer. If you're a good employee, they're going to be upset about that, whether or not they say it. And people often will say, well, you can't take your patients with you, just as a knee-jerk reaction to your departure. In reality, that there's no way they could prevent your patients from coming to see you.
Right.
You can't tell a patient who to see and ban them from seeing the clinician that they've had a relationship with. That's the ethical violation that would be on the former group to say that you can't bring your patients. Now, it is very true that often you might be working in a group practice that accepts insurances and your patients have been seeing you for $20 or $30 copay each visit.
Right.
And then you're going off to a private practice where maybe it's going to be a cash practice, or, when you think you're going to negotiate with this company and get good rates, they offer you something unlivable. And then you kind of realize, oh, it's going to take some fighting or time to actually get decent rates from this insurance. And so letting everyone in this field, as much time as possible, to let your patients know that you're leaving a group practice. 90 days would be great. I think 30 days is good, and 15 days is kind of the minimum, barring you're leaving for some emergency reason. But being very careful about letting your patients know, yes, you can definitely come with me, but hey, this is what it's going to cost to see me. This is what my hours are going to be. Maybe you're going to be working only half as much in your private practice because, you've realized, and I think we've maybe talked about this before, but the reality is the ways to earn the most money, the highest salary in this field, are to run your own private practice where you accept cash, likely mainly, or get some very well-paying insurance contracts, or if you rise into senior management for a large group, like that's how you can make the most money. So if you're a therapist and you're jumping ship because you have 3 good friends who are making twice your salary with their practices, but you're going to be charging $200 per session, whereas your patients have been paying $30 per session from their copay, that's where there's the ethical concerns for the person leaving the group practice, to make sure that your patient is informed about what the costs will be and your availability to actually see them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, thinking, as you mentioned, the knee-jerk reaction of you can't take your patients with you. It's almost as, it would be as silly as if I was somebody. My barber worked at a group, and then he decided, hey, I'm going to go start my own barber shop, and I went to go to his barber shop instead. Yeah, it would be ridiculous for them to say, that guy can't get his hair cut with you. So yeah, it makes complete sense. On the topic of insurance rates, and I'm glad you brought this up. And hopefully I'm not opening too much of a can of worms here, but how how does the experience differ between being in a private practice and being in a group practice, and your insurance contracts with the insurance companies, especially if you're coming from maybe really great rates at a group practice?
Yeah, very good question. And right, so one of the benefits of being in the group practice, and especially one that accepts insurance, is that they've probably been fighting for a long time to get reasonable rates, at least enough to make a business model that works for running the company. And oftentimes, this is changing, but oftentimes those rates are not always easy to see, although people with high deductible plans or on some of the billing statements, you as a clinician often will know, hey, this insurance company pays, whoa, look how well they pay for seeing this patient. I'm going to go start my private practice and just get a contract with them, and I'll be set. And then you leave and you get your office and you call them up and they say, sure, you can join our network. No, these are the rates and they're non-negotiable. And the rates are 20% of what the rates were at the larger group. Like you can and should battle and say, hey, I was just working for this company and I know that you were paying them this. And they will come back and say that's because they've been with us X years, or they have 25 clinicians and you're by yourself, or whatever argument they'll come with on why they're not going to pay you more. And that could dash your dreams of accepting that insurance and getting the a business model you've put together, assuming you're going to get these insurance reimbursement rates. So that happens repeatedly to people, and I know people right now who are trying to plan around their business, leaving groups and hoping to get the same rates from insurance companies. And my advice is get your business address set up. Excuse me. And start those insurance negotiations and explorations before you give your notice to your company.
Yeah, great advice. So before we move on to mental health business moment, any other thoughts with what we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a lot of options in this field. It's nice to be able to, like I mentioned, spend some time solo and some time in a group. Yeah, I think being aware of just what feels best to you in your workplace and makes you, ideally, job happiness is key to, overall happiness as well.
Yeah.
And so, if you are unhappy in whatever your current workplace or setup or private practice, don't be afraid to change what you're doing. And I have a very good friend who has worked for counties and for universities, lots of different settings. And then they had started a private practice a few years ago and were very excited about it. And then ultimately realized that it was the least favorite thing they had ever done. And so
Oh, really?
They stopped taking new patients and tapered down the old ones, and were very excited when they saw their last patient and were able to transfer them off and were just done with their private practice. So the grass is not always greener.
Right.
And be mindful of what makes you happy in your job.
Well said. So I think, that would be a good place for us to transition into another mental health business moment of the week. What are we looking at?
Yeah, and this was a good sort of educational moment for me as well this week. And on our website, the website for the nonprofit I work for, we put all of our rates up on our website. A lot of mental health practitioners don't, and they ask to call or do a free 15-minute consult before they disclose their rates. I'm sort of try to put everything out there as transparently as possible. But I realized that in how I had the rates listed on the website was, hey, for most visits, there's going to be an E&M code, these 99214, 99215, plus a psychotherapy add-on code, this 90833 or 36. And I sort of split up the E&M codes and psychotherapy codes. And, the ranges are about, $300 to $400. Most people don't pay this because we take insurance. But for people who are out of network or self-pay, or try to put what those rates are. And then we had some recent self-pay people who didn't sort of read that, hey, it's this plus this. So, 300 plus 300 is 600. But rather they had just glanced at the page and saw some numbers around 300 to 400 and assumed that was what the rate was going to be for the sessions. And then when they got their bill, which was maybe double what they were expecting, that created some emotional content, right? Like money and sex, you're going to get emotional content. And, we had everything was okay, having some conversations, explaining things as best we can, which is hard given the complexity of the billing system. But what I definitely took away from it was going back to the website and saying, it's this plus this. So in bold, here's here's the range to expect to pay, which was adding the numbers together, so it's a $600 to $800 range instead of people thinking it's $300 to $400. So good learning experience for me. I think maybe it hadn't come up yet because we hadn't had very many self-pay people, and we just happened to have a few signing up, and then it came to light. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, another good one.
Hopefully someone else can learn from some of these. And
yeah, I mean, as you were talking about this, I was thinking, like, gosh, yeah, it would be great to put some kind of compilation of mental health business moments together, or maybe a newsletter topic, or a blog post specifically just on top most relatable mental health business moments. Yeah, good content there. All right, great. Well, this has been a great episode, a great two-parter. There is no part 3. We'll be talking about something completely different next week. So we'll hope to see you then. As always, submit your questions to sitandstay@RipsyTech.com. We'd love to answer those. And if you're interested in potentially being a guest, reach out to sitandstay@RipsyTech.com. Who knows? We just love to meet new people, and the purpose of the podcast is to help as many people as possible. So we'll see you next week. And Tom, thanks for another great episode.
Yeah, no, thank you, Parker. Thanks for setting up the great questions as always.
Of course. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at RipsyTech.com.